Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this short recording, I would like to speak about, the astrology of the present moment because we are living it collectively, especially really, really intensely. And the symbols are so very obvious. So, on one hand, unfortunately, such a moment is one of the best possible means to learn astrology because it's so very obviously out there. But on the other hand, we can't trust what we see and hear, and this is also extremely obvious. So then sometimes we need to look at the chart, at the stars, at the standing of the cosmos to try and make sense of, what is happening. And as I said, so this is the best opportunity to hit two birds with one stone because this might be very valuable for students of astrology, but this can also be very valuable for many of us who are simply in a state of confusion, not necessarily that we can't through our own means make sense of trying our best to interpret what is happening, but we know that it is expressively, so directly deceptive. And let us take this keyword deception because it's playing out in the sky. But let me show you just its own segment. Let's ignore the rest. Let's just look at the deception. It's so very clear. Well, on one hand, the planet of deception itself is Neptune. Neptune is conjunct Saturn at the present moment. So Saturn in the sign of Aries, let's just say the core energy of it. In Aries, usually it tends to play out not, this isn't 100% common occurrence. This is where it's a high probability that amongst other expressions, violence, assertion, protecting what's mine, anything that has to do with sovereignty, independence, don't get into my business. What I do ultimately in my life, in my intimacy, is really my business, just my business. So all what I said, put it out on the world stage. It's playing out not just in various continents, various different countries, nations, but also within them. It's not just this country versus country, this is also individual versus their own country. Because that's also Saturn in the sign of Aries. It doesn't matter what kind of authority you are. Don't tell me what to do because I have my own sovereignty as an individual being. But at the same time, Saturn in the sign of Aries, individual, okay, but that can also represent the authority Saturn under one flag, seen as one entity. Even though that one entity, as we very well know, is divided by very many components, just like the sky, just like the cosmos, just like the human body, just like the human psyche. It's like a council, really, with many different, uh, well, executory elements, like governments, for example. But as I said, the Saturn in Aries doesn't just incorporate the individual because that's so very obvious, easy to understand, but also anything that acts as one entity. So a government, a country. So we see this, as I said, in both sides. Countries telling another country, don't get into my business, I'm sovereign. But also individuals telling any authority, don't get into my business, I'm sovereign. So we understand Saturn's symbolism in Aries very clearly. Another element is where Saturn in Aries is either super extreme boundaries. For example, uh, those neighborly situations where the neighbor isn't even allowed to look at the other side because it's an act of aggression. We all saw either on reality TV or in real life those types of neighbors and Karens and how you call the male Karen? Not Ken, something else. Kevin. That's it. So, yeah. That's very clear, but it can also play out the total opposite way, even though this is atypical for Aries where no restrictions, no more borders. This is where, for example, no more self-discipline, no more obeying law, no more withholding aggression, no more diligence, wisdom, etc., etc., only brute force. So sadly, we understand Saturn's myriad of expressions in the sign of Aries, but this is where Saturn is Saturn, okay, but really it's Neptune who is the predominant energy here. So it's Neptune drowning everything. So all of what I mentioned earlier, especially regarding entities, country, government, etc., etc., but also the individual as well, is drowned, swimming, floating, sinking, but it's surrounded by a sea, an ocean of, well, deception. It's either deception or the highest expression of this, the most positive and useful expression of this, the sense of being guided by a higher force towards our objectives, towards our goals. Now, Saturn makes it so that, of course, it's real. However, the illusory part is that how do we interpret the real? Now, when a nation, let's say, strikes another nation and adds to it anything divine nature, that's already a deception. That's already delusion. Deep, 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 deep delusion. Like delusion that is never ever gonna be truth or supported by the cosmos itself. Because that's like a total dichotomy. It's really not the principle of oneness. So when a country, an individual says that an act of some kind of aggression is in the name of anything divine, you don't need to listen further, think further. Immediately, that's the biggest red flag of deception, delusion, craze. Ultimately, that can one have. Even when the same happens where someone blesses in the name of the divine an act of aggression. So that's red flag. Whenever we see that, we know that there's the dark side of Neptune, and it's either a higher illusionary force or the individual's inner delusions guiding them. However, when the individual is steered to something that makes sense, to something that is ultimately, regardless of how we look at it, from which perspective, is useful, helpful, uh, it just makes a lot of sense for the individual or whatever to achieve that, then we can understand that even though we live the illusion of being guided, that illusion is more real than reality. So it's on, it's real, it's actual. The human mind, the ego, the earthly component of us needs the illusion. Just like we need that good book, that movie, that song. That, for example, in spirituality, music, sound of in any way, shape, and form, spoken, sung, instruments, is it like imperatively needed? No. No matter how we try to explain the benefit, it's not imperatively needed. Is it a beautiful, useful, strong, deeply magical part of it? Yes, absolutely. So this is why sometimes we need the music. We need the tune. We need to be able to hear, sense the frequency, the song of either the earth, the heartbeat of the earth, as they say, or the cosmos, or wherever your ranges can take you. Now, that is Jupiter and Saturn in the sign of Cancer. Okay, we understand the Neptunian, but it's also Jupiter, what we believe. Cancer is what is useful to us, what is self-nurturing, what is containment of bad, prevention of harm. Now we see the square between Jupiter and Neptune. We see and hear and understand. Just put what I said on the roll stage. Let's destroy to prevent harm. We see the delusionary part of it, but put this in a very, very healthy context where, like, for example, let's cut out a really harmful habit or whatever. Let's cut out a really harmful, destructive belief and belief system, way of interpreting reality, way of wanting to see the world. If we know that it's ultimately very, very harmful and it doesn't do any good. So we all already understand the Jupiter and Neptune, but we cannot ignore the Sun and Saturn. So this is like a really extra special square because on its own, Jupiter and Neptune square always in any way, shape, and form. Let's go back to 2019 when we had Jupiter in Sagittarius and Neptune in Pisces type of square. That was actually 2018, 2019. That was one of the expression here. We could see, if you look back at the world stage, all the speculations, all the spy work, all the conspiracy theories about incoming imminent alien invasion and stuff like that, and all of the truth and untruth, all of the game of chess of the intel agencies of various nations that set up a lot of the disasters that followed after. So this is, of course, yet another expression of the same energy where what's true and what is not true. Well, ultimately, action will determine that, and sadly, action is taking place. But on the other hand, Jupiter is very powerful in Cancer, so it greatly expands and amplifies the symbolism of Cancer. Borders, nations, ethnicity, containment. Saturn is also borders. So, border and things that happen around borders, of course, it's on. Cancer, immigration, foreigner Jupiter. foreigner, migrant, traveler, etc. Sorry, I had a microphone accident here. So that the sun, well, the sun's role in all of this celestial conversation primarily is to provide the spotlight, the reflector light, to really dish it out there and to highlight it on the world stage. Zero to two to cardinals is the world stage. Sun is there. Jupiter is still a bit there. Saturn's there, and Neptune is just like Jupiter, still a bit there. So of course things are playing out on the world stage. So as this energy clashes, ultimately, what's the higher expression of the square? Well, the higher expression of the square says a few different things. On one hand, what the red flag is. So the square through the red flag, in the sense, what does the red flag mean? Anything divine, anything celestial has absolutely nothing to do with conflict, with aggression, with paranoia, with preemption. Divine, cosmic, celestial, astral has why? It's purely a choice. Purely. The celestial always allows the earthly to make its choice. For example, the plant can make its choice if it's ready at a given moment to grow the branch, or it keeps it only to a leaf in the present moment because it knows what's better for itself, right? So it's always a choice. The celestial sends the light, for example, the sunlight. The plant will decide for itself what to do with it. And sometimes it's that simple. It's as complex as it is also as simple in the sense of the aggression. It's a choice. So the divine has absolutely not much to do with it. But then again, uh, we have another celestial aspect, a conjunction of Moon and Venus. Both of these planets love being in the sign of Taurus because Venus rules it, and the Moon is in exaltation here. So this gives us the power to really feel through, like powerfully, clearly, crystal clearly, feel through the value, the embodiment of this. So we have under this aspect a very strong empathic ability and basically a sixth sense to determine what's better, what's safer, what's realer. Because Taurus is real. Venus in Taurus is real. Moon in Taurus, it makes us be able to sense the realness of something much more deeper. So this helps a lot. This helps a lot with giving us a sharpened sense to be able to determine what the greater good is. So we know that aggression is never really aggression, violence, bombing is not really the greater good. So at the same time, we also can easily determine that when conflict is not really between, well, those who are actually in conflict, but it's done with machines, with technology. Yup, you guessed it, Pluto in Aquarius. that is making an ultra powerful aspect. I'll get to that in a second. So, machines, technology, we from this we can also determine that the divine has absolutely nothing to do with this. Because Mars is the principle of war and conflict and competition, right? This is tumultuous in nature, and many elements of nature are solely built on this. So nature herself is not a foreigner, a stranger to conflict and competition. But nature has the rules. The stronger usually has to prevail, or, you know. But when it's something economic at hand, there is no strength in the eyes of nature. If something doesn't exist in the eyes of nature, then it will not be regarded in the eyes of the heavens. So it's not even a conflict. It is just, well, Neptune in Aries, right? It's just, I'm not even sure which words to use here because I'd be in very big trouble. I don't care as much for my channel, but I don't really necessarily want to offend anyone. But the way we can interpret this situation is where when someone is has a moment of grave insanity and harms themselves, or rabid, when someone or an animal is rabid, anything's a target, anything's. So Neptune and Aries. But then the other element of the square, helped by this Venus Moon conjunction, is that, well, Jupiter faith, worldview, what we want to believe, what we want to associate ourselves with in spirit. That is the only remaining tool that we have to express a different desire for a, as in to express a desire for a different course of action, if you know what I mean. As in, you cannot vote, you cannot petition, you cannot protest, because all of that is totally futile. What can you do? You're not gonna go crazier than they are. So it leaves the realm of Jupiter, faith, philosophy, how we wanna necessarily, see the world and the cosmos. In Cancer, well, peace has a powerful effect, love, understanding, compassion, knowing that we as well, when we choose our divine beings, when we are average citizens, we cannot be called divine beings because we choose to live in a certain frequency and a certain matrix. When we amp up our philosophical muscle after a lot of training, we can already consider ourselves being in a range of divinity, a tiny, tiny bit, where we can invoke divine right. Divine right for this not to be a paradigm where we wanna exist in, and that has a lot of power. So this is our only choice, but that has to be done with great wisdom, in the sense that you're not gonna send the spirit to do more harm than crazy people are doing. So this is where we need to understand the, well, the, how should I say, the Buddhistic, the uh everything that incorporates that branch of spirituality. I'm not just talking about Buddhism, but any branch of it or anything similar, regardless of the name, may it be just a simple tradition or an actual religion or yoga practice or philosophy, that kind of highlights the need for great balance, peace, serenity, neutrality, etc., etc. I'm not saying that that's the ultimate truth. Absolutely not. However, that side of creation, the order principle, does tip the balance when chaos is very harmful. So this is what I'm saying. And Jupiter and Saturn, but ultimately this is Neptune is the strongest energy from all of them. That kind of says that when there is no other choice, then this is the modus operandi. Not really, actually, mind over matter, Mercury and Cancer, but it's not the technical intelligent mind over matter, but the empathic, emotional intelligent mind is over matter. So, but let's get back to Pluto, because I find this the most interesting. So, Pluto holds a finger of God aspect. The Sun, Jupiter, and Mars point to it. So, why is Pluto important? Pluto is notorious. Its very own discovery and integration into astrology is tied with anything that has to do with nuclear, atomic. Under Pluto's integration in astrology, on one hand, modern psychology was Jung, Freud, I can't say discovered, but rather put into shape and form. But also, anything nuclear was invented, discovered, researched, and used. So we are talking about the 30s, 40s. Again, Pluto made a huge move, entering the sign of Aquarius, activating the conjunction point of Jupiter and Saturn that took place on 21st December 2020. And really inviting all of us into the age of Aquarius in all of its multidimensionality. So technology, the nuclear, Pluto ruling the nuclear theme, danger, playouts, conflicts over it, again, are playing out on the world stage before our very eyes. This says that we really should not play with fire, that we really should understand that certain elements of technology should be in the shadows, should remain in the shadows, should not necessarily be actively known and wish to be known. Uh, the assassination of the nuclear scientists, Pluto rules death, the underworld. Mars in Virgo, let's take care of business in a meticulous, planned, premeditated way. Jupiter, Sun with Cancer in Cancer for different purposes, right? But it kind of suggests that if we consult the wisdom of the stars, they would suggest to us, optionally, of course, that we keep certain discoveries, knowledge, and technologies in the realm of the arcane, not to be used really. But we'll see. As I said, all of this is a choice that we are making unconsciously. Neptune conjunct Saturn, the unconscious. What is the unconscious? Cause and effect, really, that we do not see directly. We do not acknowledge, we're not aware of directly. But that makes what is in our unconscious, our true feelings, you know, the freedom of speech here. I'm gonna include this because Mercury squares Chiron. So this is important. Astrologic or astrally speaking, the freedom of speech, well, you can say hurtful things. However, rather say it than keep it in your heart. Because if you keep it in your heart, the unconscious part is going to be more powerful. So you can see the energies play out in this way in many parts of the world, especially where immigration, migrants, different ethnicity is an issue. You don't need to speak it out because reality itself will dish out what's in the true in the true feelings in the unconscious. So whatever is happening actually is truth because this is in the hearts of people. This is reality aggressively made to be everyone to be aware of it by karmic forces. So everything that's happening is really an unconscious choice. If we want to change this choice, it's actually quite simple. It's so simple. The very first step that we need to take is not really go vote, go protest, petition, but rather the first step is look in our hearts and see the truth that is there in its full ugliness. North Node in Virgo. Within the unconscious, there is no political correctness. Everyone's an animal. Any animal has, like in nature, things it's allergic to, things that it wants to be some symbiote of, wants to symbiosis with. Okay. So why does this matter? Well, it really, really matters because, of course, no human being is 100% politically correct. Everyone has genetic enemies, soul enemies. But the but that doesn't mean we really need to murder one another. That really doesn't mean anything, especially if we are honest about this. We know that we are really prone to prejudice, and this is part of human nature, but at the same time, we had many tens of thousands of years of teachings, examples, miracles, manifestations, gods coming down on earth, blah, 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 people becoming gods, all of that to show us that love can actually make a huge difference because so what if there's a small irritant in your heart? That does not mean anything and it will not determine conflict, hatred, discrimination acted out in real life and matter because that's also South Node in Virgo. You really don't need to discriminate because everyone is irritated. Everyone has things that irritated them. So big deal. So what? Like hay fever doesn't stop most people from living their lives. So what irritates you don't need to make it the king of your universe, king queen of your universe to make you act out in certain ways. You just have a feeling, you keep it in your heart, and what you act out is aligned with love. That's what would actually solve a lot of things very, very quickly in a quantum or the physics of consciousness way. Reality is really a mirror, so the mirror will have to reflect the change immediately. And Venus and Moon conjunction actually tells us that, yeah, we need to really look in our hearts of what is, because something needs to be in our heart if it's being reflected this violently. So if when we look at that and identify that, all we need to do is align to our humanity and love and have faith in basically life, nature, and the cosmos itself, that it's made for peace and serenity and harmony, and we don't need to blow ourselves up for isn't that like ridiculous? They justify peace and serenity and love ultimately with bombings. Like, I'm bombing you because I love you that much. Like, doesn't that insult is an insult to the basic human spirit's intelligence nature? So yeah, we see this play out on the world stage where the delusion can't contain itself anymore. So Saturn lost its boundaries. It can't contain it. It can't bottle it up. So it has to speak out. It has to show itself, its craze, the delusion, the schizophrenia for what it really is. So anyone can see that, well, I'm not speaking about one leader. I'm speaking about any leader, any entity that is called government or whatever. It's insane. So when we detect the problem, there's immediately solution, help, cure, etc. Because no insane knows about itself that it's insane. Someone needs to kind of tell it that, look, it's not okay. No, you're not feeling too well. And healing, help, the good, how should I say? The happy ending, the good ending to the story begins after. When someone tells the insane that they're insane and they should, you know what I mean? Or, when someone believes something so very, very, very wrong. Like me as a mystic and an astrologer, I had many times in my career souls, people who were 1 billion% convinced that they are gonna have a meeting with an extraterrestrial entity at a certain date, location, time. Now convince that person that it's not gonna be physical in real life, that it's not what they expect it to be. It's not easy because every quark of them believes in it. But all is good when you see that the person is so potent enough that you can just tell them, yep, don't expect it physically, but yep, go ahead, something will happen, because you know that the person has enough willpower and inner strength to draw something from the heavens. Like unwillingly summon something. There it is. All good. Not your business what happens after. Maybe after it will be your business when the person comes. What did I unleash? Because things are happening in my life. But when you see that a person does not have that power, and this is gonna cause a massive breakdown and loss of the positive part of what they believe, then you need to work very hard to convince the person not to expect it. You see the difference between the two. So the only way we can convince leaders that we don't want what they want, or they're not really representing the will of people. Because what does Pluto say about the will of people? Aquarius, the sign of people, and also Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. What people really want is the age of Aquarius, to grow, to discover interesting things about themselves, the human spirit, may it be scientific or whatever, to discover interesting things, to be able to travel philosophically in the vastness of the multiverse. to be able to connect to one another, but in ways that were not possible ever. They want to bond with each other. They want to dream together. They want to believe in impossible to accomplish ideals. This is what really people want. They don't want to kill each other. They don't want they want nothing to do with what is actually going on. So that's why when in Pluto and Aquarius, every individual kind of gets this wake up call. What do I really want to see in the community? When everyone kind of realizes that they actually want to see the growth, the dreams, the interhuman connections, people building together, doing stuff together, dreaming together, trying out new things, even cosmologically together, because the age of Aquarius. Like, understand the age of Aquarius like the Star Trek intro, going where no man has ever gone before. That's the visualize the music in your ear, the Star Trek music. May it be the original series or any series. That should be the vibe of the age of Aquarius, age of discovery, and not really this. But then again, this is needed if people are not led by people who actually represent what they want. So, yeah, we see this play out on the world stage. So, thank you everyone for listening, and I do hope I won't get in trouble for this. And until next time, bye for now.